I find that if I am really diligent about following how my body's feeling and not pushing myself to do too much when I'm getting the signals that I need to rest, that makes all the difference for me. And the hardest part about living with chronic illness, aside from the symptoms, obviously, it's been the grief. You deserve better than just accepting a life of misery, suffering, this is as good as it gets. Like, no, it can get better.
Welcome to the Sick is Cool podcast, the show that's here to empower you, inspire you, and remind you that even in the face of chronic illness, you can lead an extraordinary life. I'm your host, Aimee Esther, and I'm thrilled to have you join our community. I understand the daily struggles, the physical and emotional roller coasters, and the relentless search for purpose and joy amidst it all. Although none of us chose to be a part of the Sick Club, here we are, warriors navigating a world that often doesn't understand us. Together, we are going to build a vibrant and supportive community that celebrates resilience and courage of the chronically ill. Now let's dive into today's episode and start reshaping our perspective on chronic illness. Welcome, Lauren. It's so nice to meet you. Remind me where you're from.
I am in New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay. And tell us a little bit about you, your chronic illness journey, anything about you that we'd like to know.
Yeah. So I have been on a chronic illness diagnosis and then healing journey for, since I guess technically like 2017, 2018 when I started experiencing symptoms. And now I have a YouTube channel that I share my story on, and I have an Instagram account that I post to. I have a couple of like community-based programs to support people who are also going through this journey. So yeah, my journey with symptoms started pretty much my last semester of college. I started to notice I was feeling fatigued and run down, and I was like, oh, I'm just, it's senioritis. I'm tired of college, ready to move on. But then right before finals, I got sick with a virus, and pretty much everything went downhill after that in the years following. I started my teaching career. I was a full-time teacher for 2 years. Did I do 3 years? I did 2.5 years of like full-time teaching, and then I did a half a year of being an assistant after that. And I just got sicker and sicker in that career working full-time, and I was searching for a diagnosis, which I did get my second year of teaching. And then I just realized, like, I got to a point where I realized I couldn't continue on if I was going to feel any sense of normal throughout my days, because my job was like making me so sick, or just pushing myself so hard and not getting enough rest and taking care of myself properly. It was just impossible. So I chose my health, even though I was pretty much forced out of my career. But, I like to kind of see it as, I chose to put my health first, because, that's one thing that I can change is my perspective. And yeah, so now I've been on this journey the last 2 years of healing and, figuring out how to live well with chronic illness.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's interesting. We have very similar stories. I was also a teacher, and I had to quit because mine started around like at very end of college too. And then by the time I was actually teaching, I was just so miserable and sick. And remind me what chronic illnesses you have. What were you diagnosed with?
Lupus is my main one. I would say that's the one that debilitated me the most and made me have to leave teaching. But along with the lupus, at the same time, I went from having episodic migraines to chronic migraines. So I had headaches every day, bedridden migraines 2 to 3 days a week. And that was like one of my most debilitating, I say symptoms, but like chronic migraine is a whole thing on its own too. But they kind of fed off of each other. The lupus, chronic migraine. I have suspected endometriosis because I've had some gynecological problems. I have degenerative disc disease, so I've had on and off like back issues, flare-ups, like a slip disc that I couldn't stand for more than an hour for like 6 months. And that was fun. I have like symptoms but undiagnosed officially because I don't even know who to go to, of like dysautonomia and chronic fatigue syndrome, which I was diagnosed like positive for like reoccurring reactivating mono or Epstein-Barr virus. And so that's where I think like the CFS symptoms come from, because I know like they tie into each other. And yeah, like my doctors say like, well, yeah, you have like chronic fatigue and chronic mono, but yeah, that's
a lot.
Clusters, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, okay, which symptom is this from? I don't know. Am I having the migraine from the lupus or from this? Like it's so hard to know. And how are you doing now, like health-wise? Are you still, is it gotten better? Is it still like how the same as it's always been, or?
Yeah. So leaving full-time work and focusing on my health really helped me significantly reduce my symptoms. It helped me to get into clinical remission of my lupus after being very active for the 3.5 years I was teaching. But I was still kind of symptomatic up until last year, mostly with like chronic fatigue stuff and the migraines, even though they had lessened in frequency and severity. I was still kind of experiencing a lot of post-exertional malaise and just like regular fatigue and muscle weakness. But over the last year, I've really improved even more so, and I've actually improved enough that I have gone back to work in the last few months. I had the summer off because I'm substitute teaching right now. So right before last school year ended and then the start of this school year, I've been doing like half days, a couple of full days here and there at the school, but I've been able to manage half days, multiple days a week. And now recently I've been able to manage 2 full days in a week and a half day or 2 in between. So my capacity has increased and I'm not having the chronic symptoms that I was having before, as long as I like really honor my body's limitations. And that's why I like the flexibility of subbing, because if I'm not feeling well, I can say I'm not going in today or tomorrow. I need a day to rest. And I find that if I am really diligent about following like how my body's feeling and not pushing myself to do too much when I'm getting the signals that I need to rest, that makes all the difference for me in symptoms.
I love that. Yeah, like honoring. I love that idea of honoring your body, because I like, you're celebrating the win, right? Even if it's small, even if it's going from not working at all to 1 half day a week, or like the little wins are awesome, and that's what keeps us going, right? But it's still different than probably the life you had planned, right?
Absolutely. 110, like completely different life that I'm living now compared to before.
Let's take a minute to talk about the sponsor of this episode, Southern New Hampshire University. SNHU is one of the largest accredited nonprofit online degree offerings in the country. SNHU has so many amazing online programs to help you gain the experience you need to find the career of your dreams. Although there are many amazing online programs at SNHU, the one I want to share with you today is Healthcare Admin. This program was developed to align with the curriculum principles established by the Association of University Programs in Health Administration. Gain the knowledge and skills to develop your career in leading healthcare organizations such as hospitals, physician offices, care facilities, and more. You'll learn how to plan, direct, and coordinate health services and work closely with medical staff to positively impact patient care. Develop strong stakeholder communication tactics and operational strategies. Learn database decision-making and how to develop and maintain ethical policies and regulations and positive company culture. SNHU is radically affordable. Their online tuition rates are some of the lowest in the nation. Just head to snhu.edu/Aimee, that's AIMEE, to see what the current average salary for this program is and request free information about the program. When you request this information, a real person will hop on a call and discuss how the program can benefit you personally. It only takes 1 click to find your calling. Thanks again to SNHU for sponsoring this episode. Now let's get back to the podcast. We have this past life that we look to and think that should be our standard. That should be where we are now. So how has your perception of your past life, pre-illness life, changed since your diagnosis?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I had to go through a lot of grieving. I always say, like, when people ask me, like, what has been the hardest part about living with chronic illness, aside from the symptoms, obviously, it's been the grief, because there is the grief of the loss of the past self, your past life, your past dreams. Like, my plan was always, especially career-wise for me, I know for, a lot of women, we bring children and plans with children into the mix. And that's a huge thing in a different way. For me, it was more my career. I was just starting out, and I was working full time. I had a full time salary, and I was like, oh, I'm living my best life. This is normal. This is how, I planned everything. And then when that kind of all got taken away from me, with the loss of identity, especially when you tie your identity to your work, which I did, it's the loss of the plans that, okay, I'm going to teach. And then in the summers, I was going to volunteer with animals, which I always did in college and high school. And I planned to continue that. And then I got so sick, I couldn't work with animals for 8 years. And that was, I planned to go back. I kept planning to go back, and my health was just not good enough to go back. And I actually just recently went back last month. I started volunteering at my local aquarium again. So that's awesome. But yeah, thinking about, like, I used to think my past life was the only and best life that I could have possibly lived, and like anything after that in my post-illness life is just like, I have to settle for less than. But now I'm learning to see the positives of what I've gained in this post-illness life. There are still losses, of course, and I've grieved those losses. I still grieve those losses. They come in cycles, the grief, right? But I now see a new perspective where I can see the positives, the opportunities that I have now that I didn't have or that I wouldn't have had in my pre-illness life. And also just the knowledge and wisdom of listening to my body, setting and holding boundaries with people, because I used to be a big people pleaser and always putting everybody before myself, not giving my entire life to work and actually prioritizing family, friends, hobbies, social time, slowing down, again, honoring my body, eating healthy, like all of these things that I wasn't doing before, now I'm able to do. And, I'm thankful for having that wisdom now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big change in perspective to go from this is what I want and I'm just going to do it, and to like, oh, I can't do that because of, this barrier. And I think most people probably listening to this podcast, it's chronic illness, but the truth is, like, most people, their life doesn't turn out as they expected, right? And when I'm getting into that mindset of like, oh, poor me, if only I wasn't sick, I would have been able to do this and this and this. I like to think like I wouldn't actually know. Like, I have no idea whether or not my life would be better the way it is now with illness, or had I never gotten sick and gone down the path that I had originally planned. I don't actually know what would be better because I haven't experienced the other. So I just like to tell myself, like, what if this was actually the right plan for me? Like, what if I actually am like happier with this life than the one I thought was the right one? Because I don't know, right? I can't know. And so I like to, so like, it's hard sometimes for me to believe it, but I like to just like play with that. Like, but what if it was? What if this was the right life and the best life and the happiest life because of what I've learned? And hopefully one day, I find healing and I find decrease in pain and can live an awesome life. And I've learned a lot from this. But even if I have this pain for the rest of my life, I can still believe that this was actually the right path for me. Because the thing is, when we like find things like that we believe, then we find evidence of it that it's true. Like even this, like connecting with other people through my podcast and YouTube channel and being able to help people, and little things that you'll start to see if you start to open your mind to like, maybe this was actually the best life and I'm going to learn the most from it, even if it's harder, right? I'm actually going to learn the most.
Yeah, I love that perspective shift. It's definitely, in order to live well with chronic illness and get our inner peace back and sense of happiness and contentment with our life, we have to change a lot of perspectives that we used to hold on to. And it's so freeing when we do, and we start to consider other perspectives that empower us and make us feel good.
Yeah, and if we can do this with chronic illness, with chronic pain, physical pain, if we can like believe that this was the right life, imagine what we can do in other areas of our life. Again, like maybe this was the right path, because if I can learn to find joy here, wow, I'm going to be able to do amazing things as my life continues, right? So what strategies or coping mechanisms have you found helpful in processing the grief associated with these losses? Because even though, like, yeah, I do have times where I believe that, there is still that grief. Like, I still feel it today that comes up, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, the best thing that I can do for myself, if I have a day where that grief comes up and I feel like, just crying and like listening to other people's stories online, like I'll give myself a day or maybe two. I might need 2 days, but I'll give myself a day or 2 or even 3 if you need a week, that time and space to go through the emotions rather than trying to suppress them or ignore them or act like I don't feel them. I'll give myself a day or 2 to feel bad for myself and to say, this isn't fair and this sucks and I wish things were different. And I find that giving myself that space to let it out, it passes so much quicker than if I try to just push it away and be like, no, I'm fine. Everything's great. I'm not feeling this right now. I definitely think giving myself that space to process and really go into the feelings and feel it is really important. Journaling also with my thoughts has helped to like get it out on paper. So like if I'm, thinking like certain, I don't want to say negative thoughts because I don't know, to me, like all emotions are valid and acceptable. And like even the quote negative emotions, like they're important for us to feel.
My therapist calls it uncomfortable emotions.
There you go.
The uncomfortable emotions, not the negative ones and the positive, but uncomfortable.
I like that. Yeah, so if I have uncomfortable emotions, like I'll just write it out, like what I'm feeling and let myself like, get the anger or the frustration or the grief like out on paper. And then when I read through it and look over it, I'm like, okay, I feel so much better now. Like it's out. It's out.
Yeah, because I think when we hold on to it, not only does it affect our mental health, but I think most people who live chronically ill can probably agree that like when we're more emotional, we feel more symptoms, right? Like whether it's like we feel frustrated and we feel like I'll like feel it in my gut, like or I'll be like anxious and I feel nauseous at the same time. Like there's like a connection between our body and our brain. And when we are already dealing with physical pain and then we have, something like anger or frustration and we're like, oh no, I don't want to feel this. And we push it down. We're just building that up and it's going to go somewhere. And I genuinely believe like you're not just going to get, like it doesn't just disappear. It goes somewhere. And I find sometimes that it goes to physical symptoms. Like if I'm pushing stuff down, no, I'm fine. Then like I'll get to the end of the night and I'm like, why do I feel so sick? Why do I feel so much worse than I did before? And I'll realize like, no, I was pushing down some feelings. And I think you're right. We need to let them out and then they're not as light or they're not as heavy, right? I've heard the analogy of like it's a beach ball in water where like you're pushing down a beach ball and you're like, okay, just go underwater. You're just constantly pushing it down. You're pushing down these feelings. But instead, just let it float. Like, just let it be there with you. It's not that heavy. But if you push it down, then eventually it will explode out, right? And that's what I find with like any of these emotions, like anger, frustration, sadness, any of those uncomfortable emotions. It's like they build up so much that then they come out some way. Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's I burst out into anger or into tears and have a total breakdown. But yeah, we got to let ourselves feel those feelings because even though, yes, there's like, we can think positive in some ways. I don't think that it's healthy to tell yourself you should be positive all the time or that you should just get over it.
Right. Absolutely. And it's also not healthy to make ourselves like beat ourselves up over feeling those uncomfortable emotions. Like, if you're feeling like grief, frustration, anger, like it can be easy to say, oh, I thought I've been through this already. Like, I thought I worked through this. I thought I'm past this. Like, why is this still coming up? Like, what's wrong with me? None of that. talk, right? Like recognize that what you're going through, what you're feeling is 100% normal. You've, gone through an amazing like life transformation in so many ways. There's positive and negative changes that have happened in your life that you've been on this chronic illness healing journey. It's important to not guilt yourself or shame yourself for feeling any emotions that you think are, quote, not positive, like that you label as like the bad emotions, because they're all important and they're all valid. And yeah, we all have them. And there's no such thing as being happy and positive and perfect all the time, because that's not reality. That's not life. There's duality to everything.
Yeah, that's so true. And like we talk a lot about like our physical health, like as healing's not linear, right? It's not like, oh, it's just going to get better. Sometimes you try a new treatment and you just expect it's going to get worse before it gets better. Or, like we expect that with physical health, but our emotions are the same way. Like it's not linear. It's not like, okay, yesterday I was feeling, lighter about my illnesses. I was like, oh, I can take on the world even though I'm physically ill. And then today I'm crashing mentally and I'm in a bad place and I'm complaining and whatever. It's like, no, it's not linear. Like we're learning as we go, but some like even today, I coach people who live chronically ill about how to manage their emotions around chronic illness. And yet I still have times where I have a breakdown. And I just think it's important that we still talk about that. Like I'm not going to pretend that I don't do that, even if, I teach people how to handle their emotions, because I do. And it's not linear. And even though I've come a long way, I still have times where I'm in a really, a bad place mentally. And I need to allow myself to feel that and not feel guilty or bad because I'm having those feelings come up. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Let's take a minute to talk about the sponsor of today's episode, Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is a worldwide leader in at-home health tests that puts you in control of your healthcare. With Let's Get Checked, you don't even have to leave the comfort of your home. You don't have to go to a lab to get your blood drawn. It's very convenient. You can order a testing kit that will be delivered to you in discreet packaging. Once your sample arrives in the laboratory, confidential results will be available from your secure online account within 2 to 5 days. Let's Get Checked laboratories are CLIA approved and CAP accredited, which are the highest ranking levels of accreditation. Your results are reviewed by Let's Get Checked's clinical team, and you'll have the option for a virtual consultation to discuss your results. In some cases, the clinical team can prescribe a medication that can be sent to your pharmacy of choice. I've tried out Let's Get Checked a few times now, and it's been so helpful in finding some help that I needed. I was going through a period where I had very limited energy. My fatigue seemed at its worst, and I was easily able to get my thyroid checked. And as someone who has young kids, very difficult to leave the house. It was so convenient to be able to take my blood test at home, send it in the mail, and have my results within a few days. Get easy to understand and actionable health insights in 2 to 5 days from the comfort of your own home. Visit trylgc.com/Aimee, that's AIMEE, to get 25% off your at-home test kit today. Everything you need is linked in the podcast show notes or in the description on the YouTube version of this podcast. Thanks again to Let's Get Checked for sponsoring this video. I am a big fan of them, and let's get back to the episode. So how do you balance accepting like this is life, because maybe things will get better and I want to always believe that they're going to get better, and that's always where my belief is, but there's also not just waiting until that happens. Like I don't want to just wait and be like, I'll be happy once this is gone, because I tried that and I was miserable. So how do you balance accepting life as it is and still search for healing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said about balance, because it really is about balance. I think that what's really important is that we accept our current limitations, and understanding that just because our limitations are like this right now, it doesn't necessarily mean they will be forever like this, even with something chronic, right? We have fluctuations. We have good days, weeks, months, years, bad days, weeks, months, years. There's fluctuations in all of our symptoms, our clusters of symptoms, their illnesses. And so your current situation is not necessarily going to be your forever situation. Acceptance of your current limitations, while also exploring right now what you can control and what you can add to your life, or subtract from your life that's not serving you, and what you can add to your life that makes you feel like you have a greater sense of autonomy or something that you really enjoy that you're able to physically do right now. So if you like, going on hikes, if you're not physically able to go on a hike right now, first, acceptance that right now my body is unable to do that, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'll never hike again in the future. It's possible that I could get to that point. So seeing that, but then also saying, okay, if I can't hike right now, what can I do? Maybe I can go to the park and sit on a bench and enjoy the birds and, my kids playing or whatever, like seeing what you can do, what you can control while honoring your body's limitations and needs, and, still seeing that in the future, you may be able to hike again.
Yeah, I love that because I'm just like, my brain, it just gets stuck in all or nothing thinking. Like either I'm just going to live with this forever and I just have to accept that, or I'm going to like get healed tomorrow. And then I get into these like, I try everything, or I spend all my money and time and energy on trying things, or I just give up, right? And it's like, that is not healthy. And it also doesn't bring the most like joy, and it doesn't help you deal with your emotions. But I love that, where we can believe that like, okay, we're going to get there one day. We're going to be able to do that thing we want to do. But also right now we can't. And that's okay. So what can I do instead? I think that was beautifully said. What advice do you have for others who are also dealing with chronic illness and struggling with grief and loss?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is, in the beginning, you want a community that understands you, especially if you don't have that understanding in your close circle at home. I know that I turned to the online space when I was experiencing symptoms of chronic illness, and I was looking for people to understand because I felt like nobody understood me. And I was like, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm a hypochondriac. Maybe, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just exaggerating how I'm feeling, right? So finding that community of people that can support you and validate you and what you're feeling, but also being careful because, in different groups or different, content that you consume, some of it may keep you feeling really stuck rather than empowering you to focus on what you can control and, to heal in any way that you're able to physically and mentally, emotionally. And so be careful to distinguish between, how you're feeling when you're in different groups or following different pages or different content. If something makes you feel like if a YouTube channel or Instagram account makes you feel like in that pit of despair and like there's no hope and there's nothing that will get better, be careful of that and find the pages that give you more uplifting, positive, validating your feelings, validating what you're going through and the struggles, while also reminding you that, you can control these aspects of your life, and this is what you can focus on to feel better physically, mentally, emotionally. I think that's all really important.
I love that. Yeah. And I've since found people like you who create that. But I remember when I was first looking, that's how I felt. It was like everything I see about chronic illness is either it's someone who doesn't deal with it and is like, oh, just take this supplement or just eat a healthier diet and you'll be healed. And like almost like too positive and like, if you're still sick, it's your fault. You should have, like, if you just did it right, you would be fine. Or it was just like, there's no hope. Everything is sad and hard. And that's like part of the reason I started my channel is I was like, I wanted to share my story because I like to talk about it. It helps me. But I wanted to share something that was like real and like, yes, this is real life and it sucks. And I share when my house gets to be a disaster and there's a pile of laundry in the background. Like we share real life, but also like I wanted it to be uplifting and how do we find more purpose and joy in a life that we have with pain? And I couldn't find that for a long time. And so I was like, I'm going to just start that. And now I found so many people, and your channel is one of them, that's just like uplifting and shows the real thing, right? Because it's that all or nothing thinking that I think we get so stuck in, where like either life is miserable or you'll get healed tomorrow. Like we definitely need the balance, but I think we need to uplift each other. I think you're right. And I actually was a part of like different groups on Facebook and stuff. I just left a lot of them because they did feel just a lot of negativity, complaining, and I think there's a time and place for it. Like, of course, if it helps you, and that's great. But yeah, I think find what makes you feel the best.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you do need to be validated, and you need to know that you can have a better life.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think, who was it I was talking to? Like, it was one of my clients. Because I do some coaching too here and there. And one of my last clients, she said something along the lines of like she realized that she was done just like settling for a life of just suffering. And she's like, this isn't as good as it gets. Like, I'm not just going to settle for this. Like, even though, okay, I might not be able to do all those big dreams that I had before, at least not now. Maybe someday I will. Maybe. Who knows, right? But I'm going to find what I can do that makes my life better, that makes my quality of life the best that it can possibly be, even with these chronic diagnoses. And I think that's so important to take your power back and, focus on what you can control, focus on what you can, subtract from your life to decrease stress or, anything that's not serving you, and then focus on what you can bring into your life that makes you feel good.
Yeah, I love that. So how do you find, meaning in your life and enjoy your life with the limitations you have?
I think a lot of it has come through my content that I create. Of course, like you said, like we go through this chronic illness journey and we want to share with others online, which is partially therapeutic for us and it's partially helpful to other people. You create a video and it's out there for forever and people can find it. And, I still have people reach out to me from, content that I created 2 years ago and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. Like you give it, like this has changed my life, just this video. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Right. So I find a lot of purpose in just sharing my story and helping other people, the work that I do with clients. But I also find purpose in reconnecting to like my inner self and the things that I did before illness that even though I can't do in the same capacity now, I can do one way or another. Right. So we talked about like hiking, for example. So like I like camping, being out in nature, going on vacation. I like working with animals, which I recently started doing again, volunteering. Even though it's only twice a month, that's fine. Like that's great. And, reconnecting to who I am gives me purpose, like finding, what brings me joy in this new life and what I can do. And yeah,
I love that. I think we get stuck on like the thing, like, oh, I was going to be a teacher, so if I can't do that, like, I can't do anything. And opening to our minds to like, well, what was it that I liked about being a teacher? Why did I want to be a teacher? Because I went through that too, and I've been teaching my own kids now. And it's like, okay, I'm at home, but like I can teach my own kids. And it's actually even better than teaching a class full of like kids I don't know. Or like, yeah, okay, can I substitute? Or I did tutoring for a while, right? Like there's so many options and we close our minds to things because we think it's not happening in the way that I thought it would. I'm not doing the things I thought I would. And so then I'm not going to be able to do anything, right? And we've got to see that, no, there's going to be options. And again, it comes back to like, if I believe that this is the best path for me, I'm going to find an option that gives me what teaching gave me or whatever it is you want to do that's actually going to be better than the original plan. And maybe I haven't found it yet, but if I just like believe it's out there, then my mind will be open. So when I see things or hear things or like come up with ideas on my own, I will be able to eventually find that brings me that purpose again. So what are your hopes and goals for the future as you navigate this chronic illness journey?
I mean, my goals right now are to basically continue doing what I'm doing in terms of, substitute when I'm able to, continue to build my online business, continue to volunteer with animals as I'm able to, and just travel with my husband and basically just continue to accept my limitations and continue to honor my body and its needs and, move forward and see where life takes me. I'm a lot more flexible now. Like, I realize that what I want today could change in a few years, and I'm willing to go with the flow. Like, I feel like now, after in my post-illness, post-traumatizing losing my old life, now I'm a lot more open to my future changing and being completely different from what I expect it to be right now. So I don't really have like a future that I'm holding on to or clinging on to tightly. It's just kind of like, I like what I'm doing now. I'm feeling good right now because I'm honoring my body and I'm taking care of myself more than I ever have in my life. And I plan to continue that. And whatever happens from here happens.
What if it's better not going according to my plan? So do you have any other things you wanted to leave with us? Any other advice for anyone living chronically ill?
I would say what just popped into my head was that you deserve better than just accepting a life of misery, suffering. This is as good as it gets. Like, no, it can get better than, wherever you are right now. It's not your forever situation. And there are things that you can do to pull yourself out of, those really tough places that you may be in right now. And, to not give up hope. But number one for me, I always tell just all my clients, the theme is honor your body, honor your limitation. You don't have to push through and prove anything to anyone. Find your community of people who will support you in honoring your own needs, physical needs, mental, emotional needs, like whatever you need. Honor yourself. And that is the first step, I believe, towards healing. And healing is not linear, like we've said, and healing is also a continuous journey where, we don't just do this, this treatment, this cure, this protocol, whatever, and then we're healed. It's a continuous process that we have to carry out, that we basically dedicate our life to taking care of ourselves, to honoring our needs. And so, yeah, you can follow me at Heal with Lauren Nicole on YouTube and Instagram. And I hope that you find something valuable from the content that I create.
Yeah, thank you. I will link all of her information in the description on YouTube or in the podcast notes if you're listening. And it was so good to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.